Today's youth need teachers, volunteers, and most of all, well, they need you. I'm Doug Edwards, and I'm going to be talking with real youth mentors and students to give you the knowledge you need to be the best youth worker possible. This is Youth Worker on Fire.
Oh, you're trying to bring me down and run me out of town. You're taking what you want, but you can't take my rhythm now. I'm walking to my own beat, just gonna be me. I'm not replicating nobody.
I'm going to take you on a little bit of a ride through time, a little time travel here, and get you back to right where we are. Everything's about anyone working with adolescents, and it's about everything that we are, because we all go through adolescence, and it is a very major part of our lives, and it's a great time for students to come to know a relationship with Jesus Christ and make decisions, lifetime decisions, because things are growing and changing at such a rapid pace that in order for us to find the things, here's what we know. God has a wonderful plan for our life. He has created a plan for our life, Psalm 139. I just sent that to someone who I'd known for a long time, hadn't seen them in a while. And this is about opening doors for others, being kind to others, thinking ahead. And there's an article, but I'm going to tell you a couple things. Number one, I'm going to go to the article. It came from when I was talking about Gates' Law, Moore's Law, those things. It went down a rabbit trail, and this is one of the other articles. Resonance. It's called How to Open Doors for Other People. It's a mental model, just some stuff on the internet I saw, but it just really struck a chord. And I'm going to tell you about that, but I'm going to also talk about what it is like to be kind to people and to make sure that you are gracious to people that may be under you, but they are going to be the future of you. So we're going to talk about opening the doors of others, and we're going to talk about NASA, a scientist from Houston who I encountered in Oklahoma City. We're going to talk about how he ended up reaching the world after NASA and through some interns, some things like that, how all of those things started connecting me, God moving me into the realm slowly without me knowing it into student ministry. So let's start with the article, How to Open Doors for Other People. It's only polite, it says, starts that way. Hold the door open for others and they will open doors for you. That's what I'm talking about. Here's the article again. We are far more interdependent than we would like to admit. We biologically need to connect. Limbic resonance is a term used by Thomas Lewis, Fari Amini, and Richard Lannon in their book, A General Theory of Love, to express the ability to share deep emotional slates. The name comes from the limbic system, the set of structures in our brains which appear to be responsible for our emotions, among others. Once again, none of this is new to God. Do you understand that? I'm reading this. This is a secular article. None of this is new to God. I just shared with someone that I've known for years, hadn't seen him in years. And Psalm 139 is one thing I said to him. Since before you were born, God saw you being formed in your mother's womb. Before you were born, He knew every day before there was one. That's Psalm 139 encapsulated. It goes into much more detail. Resonance is not only a mammalian or a mammal capacity, but an outright necessity, says the article. Our infants will die if not provided with a warmth of connection with another being, despite being provided with all their physiological needs. This has been illustrated in inhumane 13th century human experiments by Frederick the Great, depriving babies of human connection, and more recently by Harry Harlow in Rhesus monkeys. Baby monkeys choose to spend 17 hours a day with a soft cloth mother figure that does not provide food, compared to only 1 hour a day with a wire mother figure that actually provides milk. Connection is a far superior sustenance. The next paragraph, an oft-quoted study by psychologist John Gottman suggests a partner's ability to answer emotional bids to be strongly predictive of divorce. The divorce rate is higher in couples where partners do not resonate or fail to engage and respond to requests for attention. Those who divorce for a 6-year follow-up observed to have turned towards the other on only 30% of occasions a bid was made, whilst couples who were still together averaged closer to 90%. Furthermore, a general theory of love, the authors convincingly argue that what we are actually doing is synchronizing ourselves with one another with deep impacts on our emotional and physical health. In relationship to that, I'm going to tell you, this is off the article now for a second, but in line with that, I just got through listening to another Erica Taught Me, and she had Cody Sanchez, who I've talked about both of them before. They're experts in their field. One was a lawyer, the other was in super business and owns the upside of 30 businesses now, before she's 33. She said, our generation we bought a bunch of lies from. We bought lies that we didn't need family, we didn't need other people. We could go online and just embrace everybody in the world online, and that would be enough for us. How many likes can we get? And she said, that's a lie. We don't. We've lost contact with humanity and with the warmth of humanity our generation has. And she is that generation. She says the other thing was we're taught that we don't necessarily have to be married, that family doesn't mean that very much. She says we don't need children. She said the opposite is true. We need all of those things to stay connected, to be healthy, to live longer lives. All those people live longer lives. Now, she is a 9-figure gal. In other words, she makes over 9 digits a year in her businesses. And she and the other lawyer, said to Erica, said, the reason I stopped the firm, she said, you want to embrace the people in your life that are who you want to become. And she said, the people in the firm had all the money in the world at this point, and they had lost their marriage, they had lost their children, through the divorce. They had lost friends, but they had an incredible, Lamborghini or Rolls Royce or whatever it is they had, and all the money they needed, but no connection. She says, and I didn't want that. The only thing I wanted that they had was money, but all the other things I didn't want, so I quit the firm. How interesting. And here we're talking about opening doors and the human connection and the need to be kind to other people, and that there is after effects of being kind to other people. And that has happened in my life many, many times with doctors, with lawyers, people who are former students, my sons and daughter. The way they treat my wife and I is just amazing. We're blessed. But it has to do with some of the things that we taught and some of the things we actually did and modeled. And we didn't do everything right, trust me. They can tell you that. Go to my son Ryan's episode 100. You'll hear some of that. But how does that relate with what happened to my teacher of eschatology in 1978 in Oklahoma City? He was a NASA scientist. His name was Bill. I don't remember his last name. It's been a long time. I didn't even think about this guy until I read this article. And it just kind of blew up like, oh my goodness, of course. And of course, I know some of these things, but it reminded me of Bill. My life dream had blown up in music. Here I was stuck in Oklahoma where the band was, not really stuck, felt like I needed to stay, but was just really had no clue what God was doing. So I went to the School of Ministry, thought I'd take some courses there. And one of the courses was with Bill, a former NASA scientist in Houston, who he said, I have no business being the guy that teaches eschatology or reaches out to the Arab nations he said, God spoke to me while I was with NASA, and he said, you're going to reach the world with the gospel. And he said, you know what? He said, I didn't look like a Christian. I barely ever went to church. He said, I'm going, God, why in the world would you choose me? This NASA scientist named Bill from Houston. Some things changed in his life, and he moved to Oklahoma City. And God was clear that he wanted him to get computers, and this was a big deal at the time. Remember, the computers, less than a gigabyte, was computer memory systems that stood as tall as most of your living rooms. I know because I took the course back in college, and that's what they were, a big DOS system. And it wasn't even, and they talk about, they think it is the Gemini rockets that, your smartphones, your iPhones, and whatever else Samsungs that you got have so much more memory and capability than the first computers that shot the rockets off. And so he moves to Oklahoma City, and he said, you know what? Guys tell me I've got to start a radio station, and in that radio station, I'm going to house these computers, and I don't know where I'm going to get these computers. I'm going to put the Bible in them and see what happens when we do that, and we're going to make it a radio station so we can reach out to people who are of Palestinian Arab descent and reach out to them with the gospel of Jesus Christ. And that's my mission. That's what God's told me to do. And why he would choose me, I don't know. He's telling us this in one of our first days in our class of eschatology. And we hold it in his radio station downtown Oklahoma City, which is 30 minutes south of where our church and school is, which was in Edmond, Oklahoma. Northern suburb, Oklahoma City. So Bill tells us, he said, now here's what happened too. He said, number one, he said, I went to NASA and went to some of the guys there, and I said, hey, listen, do we have any computers that we're not using that I could use? Here's what I'm going to do with them. And they said, you know what? We got a whole stash of them over here. They're really not working though. We can't get them to work. You can have all you want. And so he said, I took those, what we thought were broken down computers, and we put them in our space that we were going to make a radio station in Oklahoma City. He said, but I had to have an FCC license. I had to have a license for the radio station. He said, I needed to have a 501(c), which is a tax-exempt business status, so that it wouldn't be taxed because I'm a nonprofit organization. And he said, all those things took years to do. And he said, but when I was at NASA, I had these 3 interns. He said, and I treated them like gold. I thought, these are human beings. I want to treat these guys. He said, most of the people did not treat them well at all. And I'd call them by name, and they'd know me. They wanted to do stuff for me all the time because they knew I cared about them and knew their names. And they'd do whatever I asked them to do because I cared about them. And I really did. He said, and what happened was when I went to NASA, one of the guys that I was asking, he says, Bill, you don't remember me, do you? I said, no. He said, I was one of your interns, because this was years later after the interns had left. He says, take these computers. They're yours. Use them whatever way you want to. I think that was the first guy. I can't remember all 3, and I think that was the first one. The other 2 I remember. And he said, so I'm calling the FCC in Washington, D.C., and I'm going, hey, I told him my name, Bill so-and-so, and said, I'm going to start a radio station here in Oklahoma City, and I need a license. And I don't remember if that one was Washington or Nashville. One was Nashville, one was Washington. And the guy on the other end said, Bill, he says, this is so-and-so. Do you remember me? He says, well, the name sounds familiar. He says, I was one of your interns. And he said, listen, I can expedite this thing. I can make this thing happen. And it usually takes 2 years for you to get an FCC license. He said, I'll work it out. I think it was like 3 months. Then he got the license. He said, I made another phone call. This one probably was in DC because it's for a 501(c). At that time, once again, we're talking probably when he was doing this was 1975, 76, somewhere in there. I didn't encounter him till 1978. I know I'm old, and some of you who are younger, you're going, why do I listen to this guy? Well, because I did student ministry, maybe it was because of this, and I don't know, maybe you're still going to ask why. Did student ministry for 40 years, 35 is full-time, and I was still doing it as a volunteer, as a chaplain for a college baseball team for another 5 years. But here we are, and Bill says, this other guy at the tax office, the IRS, I guess, or wherever it would be that you'd call, and the guy says, Bill, he says, this is so-and-so again. Do you remember me? He says, no. He said, yeah. He said, yeah, your name sounds familiar. He said, I was your intern. And he says, we're going to expedite this thing. We're going to make sure it happens for you. And so it was in a very short period of time. He got his 501(c)(3). All of these things were very quick compared to the timelines. Once again, open doors for others. He opened doors for these interns. He cared about these interns. And he made sure that they knew that he was there for them. Not only would they be running errands for him, but he was there for them. And years later, the doors he opened for them opened for him. And sure enough, he took those computers, he started feeding Bible information into them, and miraculously, those computers started working. I saw them working. It was very easy to see less than a gigabyte, the size of a living room, working. And they were one of the first people in the world, I think, to put the Bible on computer. And he would hold Bible studies for Arab people in that radio station at night. And he taught us eschatology, which is if you don't know what that is, it's the study of end times, study the book of Revelation, book of Daniel, and throughout Scripture. But the book of Revelation is the main one we're talking about. The others all connect to that. So the end times, when Jesus is coming back, the 7 years of tribulation, the 1,000-year reign, on it goes. And so that was our class with a NASA scientist who God called out of nowhere, who says, I'm not qualified. It shouldn't be me. I'm not even a religious person. I barely ever would go to church. And God says, no, but you're the guy. And those interns that you are nice to, I'm going to use them to make this happen. You see, God has a wonderful plan for our life. And a lot of times it's not in the places we think it is. It's not even in the places that we can identify so people understand. Many of the things that you will do in life for God because you're following Him, people will think you're crazy. People think I'm crazy because I do this podcast. Why do you do these things? Why student ministry? You're a musician. Why did you, other people have had greater, higher callings, doctor's degree, physicians, different things, and God called them to different types of ministry, and some of them without labels. My son goes to a church where the pastor actually works in the advertisement for the car industry on a high level, pays his own salary, but he's their pastor because God called him to do both. People are going to think you're crazy. But the thing is, when you open doors and you have human connection and you treat people like they are somebody, great things happen. And God keeps connecting because God has a wonderful plan for our life. And it's all about opening doors and how to open doors for other people. So let's go back to the article. This would be keeping, the other part was talking about marriage and different things, 30%, they're 30% or less, they're really connecting with each other. The marriages stay together. It's 90% that are really connecting. This would be in keeping with the results of the well-known Harvard study of adult development, which followed a large cohort of people over a lifetime. These types of studies are rare because they're expensive and hard to carry out. This study was well worth investing in, with one clear overall conclusion: good relationships keep us happier and healthier. Its director, psychiatrist Robert Waldinger, states this. Well, the lessons aren't about wealth or fame or working harder and harder. The clearest message that we get from this 75-year study, 75 years, you getting this? 75-year study is this. Good relationships keep us happier and healthier, period. We've learned 3 big lessons about relationships. The first is the social connections are really good for us and that loneliness kills. It turns out that people who are more socially connected to family, to friends, to community are happier. They're physically healthier, and they live longer than people who are less well connected. Remember, I talked about Cody Sanchez on Erica Taught Me, and them talking about those things that were actually important in life, even though they were making money now, things they quit because those things were going to kill them. They went other ways. They were able to make the money, but they were able to keep personal connection. So they quit the things that would not give them personal connection. So we'll go back to the article now. And the experience of loneliness turns out to be toxic. Remember, they said, Erica and Cody, once again, Cody's a girl, by the way, their generation was taught a lie, that we don't need direct human contact. We don't need family. We don't need children. We don't need marriage. But the opposite is true. According to the 75-year study, let's go back to the article. And the experience of loneliness turns out to be toxic. People who are more isolated than they want to be from others find that they are less happy. Their health declines earlier in midlife. Their brain functioning declines sooner, and they live shorter lives than people who are not lonely. So what now? Where does that leave us? That's the article speaking, not me. People feel connected when they are understood and appreciated. My friend's aunt taught her this when they walked together down a busy road. Her aunt stopped to talk to a homeless man. With no money to give him, she started asking questions about his dog, chatting to him about her own dog. The interaction took 30 seconds. The man's eyes shone back bright and engaged. As they walked away, my friend's aunt whispered, "People want to be recognized." It reminds them they exist. Never take that away from anyone. Lesson learned. There's so much more to say here, so much more about the article. You can go online and probably find that article from the things I told you. Remember to open doors. One other thing that it says, and I will tell you, I'll summarize that at the end of the article. It says, you may be opening doors for people, but they don't want to go through them. It says, have you ever been in a place where you go and you think somebody's going where you're going, so you open the door and they just pass you by? He says, well, you don't go willy-nilly just opening doors. You see where people need a door open and you open that door for them. And because someone doesn't go through the door doesn't mean you stop opening doors. You keep opening doors because you keep loving people. And loving people makes you happier and healthier. So never stop opening doors, even if some are slammed in your face. So that's what I've got for you today. I hope this helps you love students, love parents, love those people around you that you're working with, even those who don't love you. Remember, the doors you open are going to be opened again for you someday. The scripture says that God's eyes go throughout the world seeking to help the righteous, those who are seeking Him. He's not just looking for anybody, He's looking for you. So you guys have a great day. See you on Youth Worker on Fire next time.
You've been listening to the Youth Worker on Fire podcast. If you like what you hear, please subscribe and tell your friends. Also, leave a comment and tell us what you think. Stay tuned for more informative episodes.